Hello, it's Tuesday, the 28th of February. It's nearly 9:15. I'm a little bit late on this stream. Apologies to those who've been waiting in the chat stream. And this is Magic the Judging, where we teach you to be a better judge. Or, in this case, just talk a lot about what happened in GP Madrid, which was an absolutely awesome weekend. I would love to thank anyone who was involved with getting me to that tournament. I had some room sponsorship, I'm lucky to say, and it was totally awesome. Thank you so much, and I'll try to tell you how awesome it was with this selection of stories that have come back. I'm not going to tackle anything in any particular order. I think everything's in roughly chronological order. I've got these kind of paper notes that I've been making all weekend. So anyone who saw me with this is my plan of which judges I had covering which rows of the Legacy tournament. I changed my plan a lot. This happens. Judges get called away to do things. Crazy stuff. Or so much logistics. Yes, when I say when we teach you to be a better judge, I'm the only one here talking, but the stories come from the experiences of many people. I have examples that have come from the brains of many, many great minds. And I could not do this stream literally by myself. Because right now, I'm here, but the fact that you're there in chat listening gives me the motivation to come here every week. Even though I've come back from GP Madrid so tired. I've slept on many buses today. Well, just two, because I get the bus to work and back. So, GP Madrid, what happened? What happened? I spent a lot of Friday travelling, got to the site, met up with some friends, and went out for a wonderful traditional Spanish meal of lamb, Rogan Josh curry. Very Spanish. Not just all Spanish. But it was good fun. Meeting up with some friends. Hadn't got to the judges. Sadly, we missed the judge meeting because it takes so long to travel from the Isle of Wight to anywhere, which is why I do not blame Kim Warren at all for moving away from here, despite having an awesome job. Missed the judge meeting, so sorry, I can't tell you anything about that. I'm sure lots of fun and games were had by many people. But yeah, I went out late, had some curry, got up in the morning. Hardly slept because I had a stinking headache from all that travelling. But managed to get up and get going and get ready and get to the GP. And I really have to thank Ray Fong for that. Raymond Fong was my roommate, and without him I wouldn't have had paracetamol, toothpaste, probably wouldn't have got up on time for the GP. I forget that. Oh yeah, he lent me a European charger so that my phone worked, so that I could be on the Magic Judges Twitter account and tweet all weekend about stuff that was going on. Yes, there are many ways in which Ray Fong saved my weekend, so thank you. Okay, so what did I actually do? The schedule for GP comes out a bit in advance. I had a question about this after the stream last week, like how do judge teams get sorted out? So for those of you who've never been to a Grand Prix, you apply. Sorry, there's an announcement on the DCI judge list normally to say what events are coming up and what kind of sponsorships are available. And you apply, and then if you get accepted, you get told whether you have a sponsorship or whether you have a purely volunteer position. And then later, when the results have kind of been collated and everyone knows who's going, the head judge or head judges of the tournament will create a schedule. And the schedule will contain who's going to be on which teams, who's going to be leading those teams. For day one of the GP, most people will be on the main event because the main event is where pretty much all the players are. Whereas on the second day, because of the cut, there's a whole lot of public events to do. And again, the head judges will decide who gets to head judge each of the events and who gets to be on those teams and so on. One of the things on the schedule for this tournament, pretty much everybody, it wasn't entirely across the board, but pretty much everybody had a buddy to work with. So like you were in a pair, had a buddy to work with for the first day, and then you were with that buddy again on the second day, even if you're on a completely different event or completely different team, you carry that person with you, which is really great for building up quality feedback to give people in reviews. Those of you who aren't judges might be surprised to know that one of the things we do, one of the things that kind of bits of paperwork that we do as judges, is we review other judges, and we do this to try to make everybody in the programme better at judging. It's one of the reasons I do this stream, because I just like improving things. So, and so this was great because I get 2 days with the same person. My buddy was Eric Dickman, I think his name was, from Costa Rica, who I was very, very impressed with. I haven't written a review of him yet, so if he's watching this, that might be a little embarrassing, but then I don't know what time Costa Rica's on, so... I will get round to a review for you, Eric, I promise, I will. I kind of figured this was slightly more important right now, but I'll get to it by the end of the week. The kind of things that are interesting for reviews is you want to be able to tell people what they've done well on the weekend, and you want to be able to tell something that they would perhaps be able to improve on, and that's difficult to do if you have very sporadic involvements with somebody. So having this schedule such that you had the same buddy on both days was really fantastic for good quality feedback. How do the GP head judges decide who's going to be leading each team? Well, subject to a certain number of restraints, such as on day one, when it's a large event, I think we had 1,360 something players in the main event, I can't remember. Not massive, but still the largest type of event there is. Team leaders on day one will always be level 3 judges at the moment. We have enough level 3 judges to be able to fill the team leader slots, so we may as well use them. You've got to use the best resources you have available to you. Occasionally, level 2 judges would get a chance to team lead on the second day, especially those who are looking to advance to level 3, and especially those who everybody knows they're trying to advance to level 3 and they actually step up and ask, like, I would like to team lead on deck checks or something. For this GP, I had said nothing about the main event. I didn't have a particular interest for the main event, but I said I do want to run a large side event. And I thought, we're in Madrid, there's a legacy side event. The event pays out €2,500 in total. Competitive large event, that should be good fun. So I asked, can I do this, please? And I got told yes. So whether there'll be a lot of stories from the legacy, because quite a lot of stuff happened in the legacy, certainly compared to the limited. But we'll get there. Kim's telling me in the chat, you do have to have completed the rest of your checklist in order to be a level 2 judge who team leads to go to level 3. Those of you who are nowhere near like level 2, level 3 judging probably don't even realise there's a checklist now that says if you want to be a level 3 judge, you have to do this, and 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 this. And pretty much the last step on there is satisfactorily team leading at a Grand Prix. And I believe at the moment there are enough people who are trying to take that last step that if you're not right there at the end of your checklist, you won't get a chance at team leading. You've got to have done all the other stuff first. On that note, I'm going to probably mess her surname up completely, but Kaya Fedorovich passed her level 3 at the weekend, which was completely well-deserved. A round of applause doesn't sound quite so good coming just from one person, but I'm sure everybody else watching this stream is applauding with me. Well done, Kaya. No pressure at all on Kim for this weekend, then. Honest. Okay, so let's get on to what actually happened judge-wise once we got to the event. Day one, I'm on the deck checks team, so I'm not team leading. The team leader was Claire Dupré, level 3 from France, and she's cool and randomly makes animal noises, which thankfully she told us about in the team meeting at the beginning of the day, so we didn't get completely weirded out. What does it mean to be on the deck checks team? Well, you will eventually be making deck checks, but the day begins at a little bit of a slower pace. If you've ever been to a competitive limited tournament, then you'll know that you would have had to fill out a deck list. I didn't prepare a picture of one. That would have been good, wouldn't it? You get, like, they're always printed landscape because there's so many cards. You just get like a big sheet of paper and it will say like Innistrad on this side, and you have a list of all the white cards in the set and all the blue cards in the set and all or the next colours, and if there's gold cards along the bottom, and if there's non-basic lands, they're put on the side. And because this was an Innistrad Dark Ascension event, then on the other side of the paper is your Dark Ascension stuff. And what happens is everybody opens up their 6 boosters and has to mark down what's in the pool. What cards do you actually have to build from? It's an anti-cheating device. You're going to pass this deck over to somebody else who's going to actually build, and if they had, like somebody did, if they got double Huntmaster of the Fells or triple Lingering Souls or whatever it is, then we need to know that they genuinely were in that pool. And the best way to do that is to have a different person register all the cards. The thing is, once you've passed that list on to the next player and they've built their list and they've written down on the list exactly what they're going to play, somebody has to count all of those lists and make sure that every single list, all 1,360 whatever, all of them have 40 cards listed as being played in the main deck, and at least 40. And yeah, this is the job of the deck checks team to start with. So generally speaking, you spend all of round 1 doing this. The reason you just hammer this job in round 1, there's a whole bunch of reasons. 1, it's quite boring, so you don't want to be doing it all day. 2, you really want to pick up deck list penalties as early as possible. You want them to be given out in round 2, ideally. I have been at tournaments where they've been giving out in round 3, not anything as big as a GP. But you do want all your deck list penalties to be going out in the same round, and the earlier they are, the better. You really don't want someone to get to 6-0 and then receive a deck list penalty or something. It's terrible. So you spend the first round just literally going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, bomb, and 17 land. Yes, that's making 40. Brilliant. Kim's mentioned in the chat that she loved all the checklists and stuff that was on the back of the deck list this time. Yeah, this really good innovation. I like this. So on the Dark Ascension side, there was a little bit of text, and there was things for you to tick off. And the first one said, "I want to win GP Madrid." So you're like, tick. I want to win GP Madrid. Yes. I have written my name on this deck list. I have written my DCI number on this deck list. I have written the basic lands I'm going to play, and more things like that. You would be so surprised at how many basic things do not get done. We had lists with no names on. We had lists without basic land on at all. We had one list where they'd dutifully written down the basic land they were playing, but had not marked anything else at all. So as far as we knew, they were playing 17 basic lands and nothing else. That's not going to win you a game. It's going to lose you a game, in fact, and then we'll try and sort your list out. Then I think by the time we got to round 2, we had something like 25 penalties to give out. So on the total of deck check teams, I think we had 18 judges spread across 3 mini teams that all had something to do with deck lists, and so they each took 2 lists, sorry, 1 or 2 lists to go and find someone and go and check their list, find out what they're actually playing, sort their lists out, give out the requisite game losses. So the idea is that hopefully from round 3 onwards, everybody's playing with a completed deck list that is that does accurately represent the cards they've chosen to play. Then you get about sorting all the deck lists. So you've got your 650 or so deck lists for your half of the tournament, and you want to sort them all out in alphabetical order so that when you go to do deck checks later, if I go, hey, I need to find the deck that Owen Cox is playing, where's that? Right, that's here, check it, there's the list. You don't want to waste time on this, because every minute that we spend actually performing a deck check is a minute that we have to give back to those players by giving them a time extension. I'll talk a little bit more about time extensions in a moment, but they're a necessary evil of tournament logistics, I guess. You've got to give time back to the players to be fair, but every minute that you give as the time extension potentially delays the tournament. And the later the tournament goes, the more annoyed everybody gets. So if you're giving one table 12 additional minutes because you did quite a long deck check, you're making 2 people happy and 648 people unhappy. That's basically how it goes. We also did mid-round deck checks in this event, which is quite common for GPs, but less common for smaller events. So this is where, at the beginning of the round, we do a deck check, fine, brilliant. Then after we've done that one, we're wandering around the floor, looking out to see, is a game finishing? Yeah, that game's finished. As soon as they present for game 2, we'll do a deck check. Now this panics a few players, because they're like, I sideboarded, of course my deck isn't going to be the same. Well, no, fine. But we realised some time ago that if we only ever checked decks at the beginning of the round, and everybody knew this, then game 2 is a great time to sideboard in that Huntmaster of the Fells that isn't actually in your pool, and cheat savagely with it. And if you know that we're never going to deck check you at that point, then you're going to get away with it. So we started deck checking at that point, so that people didn't get away with it. Finally, after you've managed to get some deck checks in and you've done this, it's normally time for a break at that point because you've been working pretty hard. So I don't think I actually got on the floor to answer a judge call until about round 4 of the tournament or something. I didn't even know what round we were in. It's just the way it goes being on the deck check team. But then it gets good. There's a few stories from day 1 that I can share with you. You get to see some crazy things that the players do. I want to show you this card. Lost in the Woods amazingly managed to win a game 2 of a match in the GP where a player decided, you know what, I'm going to sideboard out my entire deck and sideboard in Lost in the Woods and 43 Forests. Perfectly legal, by the way. In Limited, you can sideboard in and out as much as you like, as long as what you're sideboarding in was originally in your card pool or is additional basic lands. That is one very ballsy way to go and win game 2. Sadly, he tried it in game 3 too, and his opponent was wise to the fact and boarded in some enchantment removal. Didn't work out so well. Still, awesome story. What else happened on day 1? On day 1, we had a cheating investigation that I can tell you about because it didn't come to anything. So one of these mid-round deck checks that I was talking about, I do have a deck to hand. I saw someone do this. So I saw somebody they had their deck, and they finished the game, and so they go through their deck, and they go, bum, 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 these cards, these cards, these cards. I'm going to sideboard these cards out. And they had, in their sideboard, a bunch of cards in sleeves, which they picked up to put back in. So they've done their deck, and you can see they've got their main deck here, and in their sideboard they now have these sleeved cards, which is obviously the cards they've sideboarded out. And so we swoop, and we pick up the main deck and sideboard, like we always do. And we go and check the deck to see if all the cards in there are on the list, which they are. But we did notice that a card that was supposed to be in the main deck, and therefore sided out in a sleeve, was present in the sideboard, but not in a sleeve. So I asked myself the question, how did it get there? How did this card get into the sideboard without a sleeve when it was supposed to be played main deck? And I just watched the player de-sideboard, and he didn't de-sleeve anything, he just took them out. I thought this wasn't enough to go on to give any kind of penalty at that point. But we decided, hey, we're going to deck check the guy again at the beginning of the next round. So that's what we did. We handed the deck back with no indication whatsoever that anything was up. We do a deck check at the start of the next round, and sure enough, this card that he's supposed to be playing main deck isn't there. It's in his sideboard. Now, if you're used to the pre-release kind of way, or the regular rules enforcement level way of building sealed decks, you're allowed to change your deck in between rounds, there's no problem. At a competitive event, like a Grand Prix, you can't do this. You must begin every match the same way. So alarm bells are going off. I think he's done it one match before. I think he's done it here again. So he's definitely committed failure to de-sideboard or something along those lines. I don't think it's actually called that anymore. Everything got mixed into one big infraction called deck list problem. But I can still colloquially refer to it as failure to de-sideboard. He's definitely done that, but I'm thinking he's done this deliberately. I'm thinking cheating, which would be a disqualification. Long story short, we get the head judge involved, get investigating, and we realised that what actually had happened is on that deck list I was talking about, there were 2 cards next to each other on the list, and he'd marked he was playing this one, but was actually playing the one immediately underneath it. So we decided, yes, actually he wasn't cheating at all, he'd just got his deck wrong in the first place. Still led to a game loss because it wasn't correct, but still better than being DQ'd. The funny part of the story, and one that the head judge did not tell me until after all of this investigation had happened, he said, do you know who this player is? Right, no, he's not like a big name pro or anything like that. He goes, okay, on the Friday before the GP, there was a judge seminar. And at the seminar, somebody had brought a professional magician with them to show shuffling tricks, sleight of hand things, and say, hey, look, these are ways you can probably cheat at magic. Obviously, the guy we were investigating for cheating was the guy who was the professional magician, who was telling everybody how to cheat on the Friday, and known to all the judges. Still, it's good to follow up on suspicions, but funny nevertheless that we chose quite an interesting target to go for. We did, a couple of my local players were involved in some interesting calls as well. Sadly, one of my local players was given a game loss for drawing extra cards when he began the game. He's got his 7 cards in hand, and he keeps. And then for some reason, and I don't know why, because he's an experienced player and absolutely not an idiot, starting the game, going first, draws another card. And he was telling this story to me as like, oh god, fastest game loss ever. Sadly, for him and everyone involved, it's not a game loss at all. There is an infraction called improper drawing at start of game, which basically exists because there are some instances of infractions that sound like they should be drawing extra cards, which is a game loss, but the potential for abuse is that much lower that we only want to penalise them with a warning instead. An improper drawing at start of game is a very long name for an infraction that fits this. One of the examples is drawing the card when you're on the play. Thankfully, I was able later, I couldn't get the penalty changed, it had happened a long, long time ago, and we don't go back and correct mistakes like that, but I explained to the player, yeah, sorry, judge made a mistake in this case, it does happen, and I went back to the scorekeeper to look at the penalty history and find out which judge had given the penalty, so I could find the judge and I could explain to him why it was incorrect, and also it was doubly incorrect, because if you are a floor judge at a Grand Prix and you're to give a penalty that's as severe as a game loss, you're supposed to consult with your team leader as well. And exactly because mistakes like this shouldn't be made. You would go, right, what you've done is blah, 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 this would be penalised with a game loss, I need to go and confer with my team leader to just verify this, go away, get it verified, come back, apply the game loss. It doesn't take long to double check. So, yes, a couple of takeaways from this. If you know the rules as a player, you can stick your hand up and call a judge when stuff goes wrong. But if the judge does something you're not quite sure of, you can appeal this. You can go, actually, I'm not sure this is correct. I'd like to appeal this to the head judge or something like that. So, yes, that's your right. As a player, if you think something's up, appeal to the head judge. Brilliant. If you're a floor judge, and you're going to give something like a game loss, it's very normal to consult with your team leader before doing that, exactly to prevent these kinds of mistakes. It happens. And what was the other one? Yeah, Chris Norris was involved in a very interesting one, where he nearly managed to get himself disqualified because his opponent, going into Game 3 with a small number of minutes on the clock, said something like, hey, a draw knocks us out of contention, so we should probably work out who's going to concede if we go to time, and offers to roll a dice, which is bad, but it's a strange kind of bad, though, because it's not something that's just intuitively bad to everybody. No, there are people who don't don't understand at all why it's bad to roll a dice to decide who's going to win the game. And like, a draw is the worst result you can have, so somebody winning gets to go to day 2 and the person losing doesn't. Basically, it stems from gambling laws, as far as I'm concerned. Gambling laws across the country are all very, very, very different. And so we absolutely have to stamp out any kind of behaviour that could be misconstrued as gambling, as well as actual gambling itself. And this is the main reason why determining a winner randomly, or improperly, as the infraction's actually called, but random determination is one form of improper determination. I'm trying to think of an improper form of determination that isn't a random one. Probably arm wrestling or something. That would be bad. I don't know why. Someone's going to try that now I've said it. Oh, yes. Kim's just written in the chat the race incident, and I'm thinking about racism. Like, no, racism isn't improperly determining a winner. No, 2 players got up. I think this was actually to decide who would go first. They decided to run the length of the tournament and run back again at some Pro Tour some years ago. Only it involved going around a curtain, and there was equipment for the coverage of the top 8, like video cameras and things, and one of them tripped over it, and it all went very wrong. Very, very wrong indeed. But here's the sad part, well, what could easily have become the sad part of the story. The player who offered to roll a dice has obviously broken our rules and needs to be disqualified at this point. What happens to the player who's been given the offer? The thing is that my local player, Chris, he's a very kind of kind, gentle person. He's only ever played FNM before, and he doesn't actually realise that what he's been offered is against the rules. He kind of morally knows that this shouldn't happen, so he says something along the lines of, I don't know about that, let's just play game 3. By not immediately calling a judge, it brings a heck of a lot of suspicion at you, because you almost seem to be complicit with the action. But a spectator, who was another one of my local players, saw the whole thing and decided to get a judge involved because he wasn't entirely sure. And it was the correct thing, and I believe a disqualification happened at that point, as it should. Thankfully, from my perspective, only one person got disqualified. I think it's the right result. I don't really want to go too much into that. But another example, know the rules so that when your opponent breaks them, 1, you can get them disqualified and you can get a free win. 2, you don't get disqualified by accidentally looking like you're complicit in this. Cool. So that was most of the interesting things that happened on day 1. The only card that really had any kind of interest being this one, Lost in the Woods. I still couldn't believe that one. Oh, no, I didn't write this down on my notes. I remembered one. I don't have the card set up, but I couldn't have asked for a better example. GP level play, and something happens to do with state-based actions in the combat phase. Because my last couple of streams have been about, well, apart from the two-headed giant one, state-based actions and the combat phase, and I was so happy to see this play out. I don't remember the card name. Somebody will tell me in the chat. It's a Fateful Hour card that gives all your creatures +1/+4 when you're on 5 or less life. The basic situation is guy attacks with loads of stuff and other guy blocks with loads of stuff, but deliberately leaves a couple of things unblocked. And the attacker just goes like, oh, yeah, sure, all of these guys trade. And the defender's like, no, they don't trade, because you just attacked me down to 4 life. So these now have additional toughness. And you didn't assign lethal damage to them. So by the time we get to the state-based actions check, the Fateful Hour ability is kicked in and it saved all the creatures. It was a complete and utter blowout to an on-board trick. Not that it was a trick at all, it was just that one guy knew the rules and the other guy didn't know the rules. I would love to finish the story by saying that it was because he had watched this stream, but I don't think that's true. Still, I can dream. And it actually is... I couldn't think of an example the other week about why you would want, even though you have the option, why would you want to assign more damage than necessary to a creature when you could kill it and assign more to a second blocker? And there's a good reason. right now this creature's toughness is 2, so I only need to assign 2 damage to it to kill it. But some static ability is going to make a continuous effect apply right now that's going to boost its toughness before we get to the state-based action check. That is a reason to assign more damage than you need to. Fantastic play, loved seeing it. So, my notes now take us on to day 2. There's a heck of a lot more card examples for this part, because I was the head judge of a legacy tournament here, and I really enjoyed it. We had 236 players when I started, and a few late enrolments, so I think we got to 240. We didn't quite beat the standard tournament that began an hour later. They got to something like 250 players. Either way, it's 9 rounds of Swiss, which is quite a lot. Actually, that's a good point. A lot of people think that the number of rounds for a tournament is based on the powers of 2 of how many players there are. So 8 players is 3 rounds, 16 is 4, 32 is 5, and so on. It's slightly more subtle than that. I believe the number of rounds is based on guaranteeing that a player with 1 loss will be in the top 8. And it so happens that Powers of 2 works for this up to a certain point. And it's the 9-round one that is the first one to go wrong. So you do your Powers of 2 up to 128 players, but you need a 9th round at 226 players, not 256. That actually caused so much confusion on the day. Like, I correctly announced we had a 9-round tournament. People were coming up to me and go, why 9 rounds? It's less than 256. What are you doing? I know, it's more than 226, that's how many you need. 226? That's not a power of 2. No, it's not, I know that. But it's in the NTR, and that's the number that's there. I'm doing this. The NTR isn't this big, but my phone is, and it has the NTR on it. For those non-judges out there, NTRs are they're the Magic tournament rules. It's the tournament side, complement to the comprehensive rules. So the comprehensive rules are how to play the game, and the tournament rules are how to put the game in a tournament setting and still make everything work. It's an important document to read if you're going to do a judge test, because there's questions about policy that are in the NTR. And what was I going to say? Yes, I'll do a judge stream about various parts of the NTR later. Not today, obviously. But, everyone's dinner nearly went horribly wrong. I pointed something out, and I saved dinner for everyone. Woo! I hope that's me that you're talking about. I saved dinner. I didn't even know. How amazing. Right. Let's go to some examples of what happened. So, I've gone off of my paper and notes for this, so it's basically in a chronological order. If you think that it hops around and I have lots of unrelated topics talking about things, that's because this is what happens at a Magic event. You do something, you flip to something else, you flip to something else, you flip to something else. All the while, you're trying to remember, have your judge staff, have they all eaten their lunch? Are they getting enough water? And then suddenly someone asks you a question about progenitors. You're constantly changing focus, which is one reason I love doing these streams, because I get to actually pick a topic and really focus in on it for a few moments. But here we go. Here's a day in the life of a legacy head judge. So we have Brainstorm. It's an amazing card in Legacy, so you'll see it everywhere. It's got there's a lot of issues around playing Brainstorm. Draw 3 cards, put 2 cards from your hand back on top of your library. You wouldn't think this was very easy to get wrong, but it really is. First example I had of it going wrong was where a player drew 3 and then put 3 back on top of their library. So they put 1 more card than they were supposed to. This is weird, by the way. People normally accidentally resolve Brainstorm in such a way that they end up with more cards than they should have had and try to get away with that. So having less cards than he should have, so kind of hurting himself by getting it wrong. It's a different way to see this kind of problem. It makes you think a little less about cheating. And what happened was they got to the next combat step, and he goes, I think I put 3 cards back when I resolved the Brainstorm. So the judge gets called, and he does a bit of investigation and says, well, what were the 3 cards? Obviously, this is done away from the table so that the opponent's not hearing what was on top of the deck. And he says, the 3 cards, they were They were a Vendilion clique and an island, and actually I don't remember the third card. And this got the judge's suspicions going. He's thinking, why would this guy be claiming to have drawn 3 and put 3 back, but not actually know what the 3 cards were? Is he trying to just cheat an extra card here? I believe, although this may have been lost in translation, I'm not entirely sure, that he was basically asking his opponent, can I just draw a card back now? He didn't call a judge himself to go, wait, I think I resolved this wrong, which makes you suspicious. And the judge came and got me because he wanted me to conduct an investigation for cheating. And by the time I got back, the Brainstorm player had conceded, which made me even more suspicious. So, lesson number 1, resolve your cards properly. Lesson number 2, if you do not resolve your cards properly, call a judge to try to get the error corrected. Lesson 3, after having called a judge, don't concede in the middle of the judge trying to sort things out. It looks so suspicious. Ultimately, I believed the guy was just a mess, didn't know what he was doing. It was a close call, I have to say. The concession didn't help. I got both players to talk me through what the game state was like. So me arriving at the table with no cards anywhere, I had nothing to go on, so I made the players kind of replay things, tell me what was going on. They understood exactly why I was doing it, and the people around certainly appreciated that I was making some effort to try and detect some cheating going on. But ultimately, I thought it was all just a big collection of innocent mistakes. Don't concede in the middle of a judge talking to you about something so stupid. We had one situation where a spectator was interested in appealing a ruling. The ruling was to do with intuition. Oh, that's interesting. I've inadvertently demonstrated one of the important things about legacy here. Because the intuition that you're reading says, search your library for any 3 cards and reveal them. An opponent chooses one, put that card into your hand and the rest into your graveyard, then shuffle your library. But the Oracle text has a very important magical word in there that's not on the card itself. The Oracle text says target. Search your library for any 3 cards and reveal them. Target opponent chooses one. Put that card into your hand and the rest into your graveyard, then shuffle your library. So, first lesson about Legacy, the cards lie. Pretty much every other format, obviously discounting Vintage, read the card is something you should know. For Legacy, don't read the card. The card will lie to you. The Oracle text is good. And actually, the fact that intuition targets is important for this question. Because it targets an opponent, the question was asked in the game, can I misdirect this intuition? And the judge at the time ruled, well, I will let you have a think about how you would answer this question. Can you misdirect intuition? So here's the thing. Misdirection has a target. The legal targets for misdirection are spells with a single target. And intuition, as we saw from the Oracle text, does have a single target. So misdirection can legally target intuition. But when misdirection goes to resolve, you try to do something with it. It can only target an opponent. Opponent is still from the point of view of the player who played intuition. So the target can't actually be changed, in a 2-player game anyway. So misdirection could resolve and do nothing. So I take you back to the original question. Can I misdirect intuition? Well, I can cast the spell and target it, but it won't actually do anything. And this is a competitive level event, so I've got to be slightly wary of leading you on somewhere. Thankfully, I don't think the question really needed to be broached here, because I believe what happened was, like, this did play out, and a spectator got involved and said, wait, I don't think you can do that. I believe, actually, the judge made a mistake here and ruled that the misdirection couldn't have been cast, which is incorrect. if you see it happening, if you see the misdirection being cast, you can't even stop them because an infraction hasn't actually happened at that point. There's a philosophy section at the beginning of the IPG that says when do judges step into games, and because something has gone wrong is why you do, and because an infraction has been committed, because something's going to escalate. These are reasons why you step into games. Because a player's inadvertently been a moron is not a reason to go in. So at competitive, you should really be ruling here that the misdirection got cast and does nothing, and apart from adding 1 to the storm count, and it kind of sucks to be you. I would suggest not actually telling the player that it sucks to be them, by the way. I'm not known so well for my tact. I apologise for my language breaking down. I've still got a bit of GP English, by the way. I find my English gets a lot worse when I go to a European GP because I want to talk more slowly and use simpler words because I want the foreign judges to be able to understand me. And it continues whilst I talk to English judges. I was like, my language has gone completely. So, yes. What happened next? Someone did a deck check and they found some sleeves with marks in them. 3 of them. There were 3 very visibly marked sleeves in the... I'm not sure. I don't want to mark this sleeve to be able to show you. But on the back of the card, pretty much there, was a really heavy finger mark on 3 of the cards. And the cards, all 3 of them, turned out to be Delver of Secrets. So we gave mark cards penalty and we said the potential for abuse is absolutely massive on this one. Delver of Secrets being a 1-drop, having the 3 of them marked, you upgrade the warning to a game loss for this. You're going to lose the game. Replace these sleeves. I'm not letting you get away with this kind of thing. But do I think he was cheating? Again, no. Because if you've played with double-faced cards at all, you know, and especially with Delver, the whole point of it is that you play him, you flip him. The chances of you damaging your sleeve every time you flip it is quite high. If you play the deck a lot, you're going to damage just the Delvers, because they're the only cards in the deck that flip at all, and you're going to end up with mark cards pattern. It's an unfortunate chain of events that leads to you getting a game loss, but it's pretty much inevitable if you don't look after your sleeves. So have a think about that. Here's the situation that Kim alluded to earlier. Kim was judge manager for the day, which basically means her job is to make sure that everybody is good. Everybody's looking after their own health. There's enough staff on each of the events and so on. So she's not tied to one particular event, but is generally responsible for making sure that all the public events are properly staffed and everyone's healthy. She came over to find me and inadvertently ended up taking a judge call because of this card, Vendilion Clique. Again, a little bit like Brainstorm, it's quite a simple thing to be doing. Brainstorm, draw 3, put 2 of them back. It seems simple. Vendilion Clique, reveal your hand and choose a card from it, put it on the bottom, draw another card. The potential for this to go wrong, though, is so huge and in just tiny little ways. And I will venture the opinion that legacy players are perhaps not the most precise of players with how they play. Legacy has always struck me as being a little bit more casual than the other formats. It's becoming a lot more competitive, mainly because of the Star City Games Opens. But yeah, there's a lot more casual legacy players than I think there are casual standard players in something like this. So, what happened here? Vendilion Clique comes on the table. Player reveals his hand, and the other player, he's got a pen in his hand and he's writing down the cards that he can see, and this is quite common from competitive players. I've seen your hand, I don't want to go to the mental strain of trying to remember everything that's in your hand, so I'm going to write them all down. Perfectly justified and, in fact, a good play. But as he's writing the card name down, he says Reliquary. And because he's seen the Knight of the Reliquary in his opponent's hand. Now, his opponent has understood this as... you want me to put the Knight of the Reliquary on the bottom of my library and draw a card. So he goes and does it. Thankfully, he's still got the rest of his hand face up on the table. The card he's drawn is face down because obviously he doesn't want to show it to his opponent. So we know exactly which card he drew. When the opponent goes like, wait, I didn't mean this at all. and we get to reverse the whole thing without too much of a problem. The interesting question is whether there's any infraction here, and judges who like to show off their knowledge of the IPG will mention something called the player communication violation, which is an infraction to cover people accidentally saying wrong things about the game state. So if someone asks you how many cards you've got in hand, and you say, yeah, I've got 4, and then you actually look and you go, oh, no, wait, I've actually got 5. If you weren't doing it intentionally, you weren't cheating, but we need an infraction to cover something like that, because it can be important. And that's what player communication violation is for. Now, because it says where players are communicating and something goes wrong, people will tend to try to apply this infraction to every instance of some communication going wrong. And I would also say that if you don't have much experience at things like European GPs, when a lot of players that speak very different languages are coming together possibly for the first time, communication issues are all over the place. It's going to happen a lot. So I personally believe there's no violation here whatsoever. One guy said reliquary, the other guy interpreted it a certain way. It's a thing that happens and we fix it, but we don't believe anybody is at fault for this, so why would we penalise somebody with a warning for it? That's something to remember. Okay, we had a Joking Grunt in play. This is a cool legacy card, but it's got cumulative upkeep, which is something that hasn't been around for a few years, and it's pretty much the only card I can think of with cumulative upkeep that's played right now. Because it targets graveyards and there's so many abusive graveyard decks in Legacy. I'll correct myself there. I said it targeted graveyards. Of course it doesn't target graveyards. Such sloppy terminology from me. I apologise for that. What happened was it was just a simple case of mistrigger. This guy in the upkeep, you're supposed to put an age counter on and then decide whether to pay the cumulative upkeep cost. And if you can't, or you choose not to, then your guy gets sacrificed instead. Oh yeah, Braid of Fire is a good cumulative upkeep card. Thank you to everyone in the chat mentioning Braid of Fire there. Yeah, so the guy drew a card. We've got a mistrigger problem here. So the trigger has a default action. The default action is you sacrifice the guy. So the guy gets sacrificed. That's it. We don't back up mistriggers. We just go, well, hey, you had a choice here, and we're going to say, oh, you chose that. We then proceeded to have a bit of an argument with the player, because the player was like, no, wait, I know the rules for this. I've got to put an age counter on this. So because I have to put an age counter on, then it's got a visible, I don't remember the wording, rubbish. The IPG says that missed triggers that have a visible effect on the game state are dealt with a certain way. But we checked, and no, this card is definitely treated as a case of, no, there's a default action, you missed it, it gets sacrificed. We eventually managed to calm the guy down and say, no, this is the way it's going to work. He didn't appeal to the head judge, but the floor judge did the best thing he could do, which was basically explain, no, this is how it works, and if you like, I can go and get the head judge to explain it to you, basically prompting the player to essentially appeal. Yeah, I got involved and said, no, the guy's sacrificed, and he wanted to argue a little bit more, and I said, no, the guy's sacrificed. I think I pretty much ended things by picking up the Joking Grunt and putting it in the graveyard. Said, no, we're done here. I didn't feel the need to issue any kind of unsporting conduct penalty for this thing. He was obviously embarrassed from missing the trigger and just trying to save face as much as he can. I can't blame him for trying to stick to his line. I don't feel like he overstepped the mark. If he got a bit louder, maybe he would have done. I'm looking in the chat and seeing a good question here. If the hand from the Vendilion Clique example was not face up, are we looking at drawing extra cards? So this is where the hand's on the table and the guy said reliquary and he interpreted it as meaning discard the card, please. Are we looking at drawing extra cards because the guy's gone on and resolved the thing that he wasn't doing? No. You because you've seen the whole hand, you probably know what the card is that's been drawn. Even if you don't, you can just put a random card back and go, hey, look, well, this is going to be drawn in a moment anyway, or something along those lines. There's ways to fix this without resorting to drawing extra cards, which would be quite horrible for a poor, just a minor slip in communication. Okay, so after Joke and Grunt, which was the mistrigger example, then we had a question of a certain combination of cards. A player gets Painter's Servant in play and has chosen blue, so all of his opponent's cards everywhere are blue. And he has Grindstone, so this is quite a well-known combo. Grindstone puts the top 2 cards of target player's library into that graveyard, and then if they share a colour, you keep going. So, yeah. All of the cards are blue because of the Servant. You reveal 2, they're both blue. They go into the graveyard, and you repeat it, and the guy gets decked. Unless he puts Wheel of Sun and Moon out and says, it was one of the... Is that one of the first enchant player cards? It might well have been. If it would be put into the graveyard, then instead put it on the bottom. So what happens here? Well, Grindstone says, I'm looking at 2 cards, are they the same colour? Yes, they are, I'm going to discard them. That's going to put them into the graveyard. Sorry, it's not... I said discard. My terminology is slipping all over the place. It's not discard, it's put into the graveyard. They would be put into the graveyard. So Wheel of Sun and Moon steps in and says, hey, I see you're going to put 2 cards in the graveyard. I'd like to replace that with putting them onto the bottom of the library. Yeah, replacement effects. So Grindstone says, okay, fine. But the 2 cards both shared a colour, so I'm going to carry on doing this. So I look at 2, and they're both blue, and they go to the bottom of the library, and this keeps happening. And the Grindstone has no optional ability on it. It doesn't allow you to stop early. And Wheel of Sun and Moon has no get-out clause. So the players are locked in some kind of loop that they cannot get out of. So the game's a draw. And that's how I had to break it to them. Someone pointed out you could get into the same problem with 2 Progenitus. You had 2 Progenitus in your deck. Then eventually you're going to end up with just the 2 Progenitus in your deck and keep looping, and that will end up in a draw. Whereas if you only had 1 Progenitus, well, eventually... Actually, how does that work? If you've got one Progenitus only... Answer in the chat, please. My brain is broken. Kim is prompting me to mention the new slow play policy. There's nothing to do with the slow play policy in this loop, which involves the Wheel of Sun and Moon and the Grindstone, because it's a draw straight up, and there's absolutely no way to get out of it. What happens if you... Yeah, if you've got the 1 Progenitus in your deck, then every time you try to mill a Progenitus, it will get shuffled in. But you just keep going, and again, because there's no option involved in this at all, you'll end up winning the game, because there's no way for this to end up any other way than you have 1 Progenitus in your deck. Grindstone hits 1 card and stops. Yeah, cool. The coverage guys then came up to me with a question. They said, if you had Mirror Gallery in play, could you get 12 Jaces in play? So, like Jace the Mind Sculptor, Jace Beleren, and the other one, Jace the Memory Adept. So 3 different Jaces, 4 copies of each in your deck. Can you get 12 Jaces in play using the Mirror Gallery? And this one's quite an easy one, because although Planeswalkers that share a type get put into the graveyard in very much the same way that Legends with the same name do, Mirror Gallery specifically says that the Legend rule doesn't apply, and whilst the rule that applies to Planeswalkers is very similar to the Legend rule, it's not the Legend rule. It is, in fact, the Planeswalker Uniqueness rule, which someone doubted my ability to remember the name of the rule, and I was like, oh, I'm pretty sure this is right. And they said, no, I'm pretty sure it doesn't have a name at all, and I found it. Ha! It's the Planeswalker Uniqueness rule. It says so in the section on state-based actions, which I might have covered some time ago. Episode 1, yeah. Back into cool things. how do you hardcast an Emrakul in Legacy, where you tend to die quickly? Well, one answer that somebody found that I quite enjoyed was they played Moat so that the creatures couldn't attack, and I guess they were just lucky that their opponent didn't have flyers or something. I don't know. So they couldn't be attacked. They had Sterling Grove out, so the Moat couldn't be targeted. They had a second Sterling Grove out, so neither Sterling Grove could be targeted. They had a Leyline of Sanctity out, so that they couldn't be targeted. They had a number of wild growths on things to make lots of mana, and they had this land that also makes a lot of mana. That's going to let you hardcast Emrakul. Brilliant. Loved it. Fantastic. Yet another reason why I love judging Legacy, because you just get to look at game states and go, what the actual hell? This is brilliant. Oh, someone's telling me that deck is boring. No, it's not boring, because no, it's fun to look at a game state and go, that's brilliant. I can't believe you did it. Oh, another cool interaction. I don't have the card examples up for this one, but it was Reanimate with Platinum Empyrean. Two cards I've never seen played together before, and some Legacy rulings go like this so often. Someone asks you if something works, and you look at the game state, and you look at your Oracle text, and you're just suddenly surprised. Like, wow, yes, I've never played with that. I've never heard of that combo before. That's fantastic. Reanimate says, put a target creature from your graveyard into play, and then lose life equal to the converted mana cost of the creature that you just put into play. So if you try to reanimate Platinum Empyrean, what happens is you do the text listed on Reanimate. You do it in the order it says. So it says, take the Platinum Empyrean and put it into play. Do that right now, before you even think about losing life. And now, lose life equal to the converted mana cost. So it says, well, lose your 8 life. A Platinum Empyrean is now in play, so it gets to go, no, don't lose 8 life, your life total can't change, stop that. So that's quite cool. Nice interaction, enjoyed that one. Another one that happened was Maze of Ith with Knight of the Reliquary. So you attack with Knight of the Reliquary, you get your damage in, and then after damage, but still in the end of combat step, Knight of the Reliquary is still considered to be an attacking creature. So you can tap your Maze of Ith to untap your Knight of the Reliquary. Any combat damage it would deal this turn would now be prevented, but it already dealt it, so we're not going to go back in time and prevent that one. And even though combat damage had already been done, it's still an attacking creature, so it's perfectly targetable. Fantastic, love that trick. I learn about this game every time a player asks me a question, I think. A question that I was asked that didn't cause me to learn anything was this one. City of Traitors is in play, and it says if you play a land, sacrifice City of Traitors. Path to Exile is a nice card that gets played a lot in Legacy. You exile a creature, and that player can go and search his library and put it onto the battlefield. That's not playing a land. So these two cards have nothing to do with each other. There is no interaction here at all that I can think of. Not one. You can't even tap this land to pay for this because it's colourless. What can you do? Speaking of cool things that tap for mana, this is a cool thing that taps for mana. It's an Altered Art Noble Hierarch. You can see how the artwork has been painted out to the edge. I love these cards. They're really cool. I love the kind of life that this gives to the game. An important thing to note is that it's important to know that the card really is a Noble Hierarch. It can't have been painted out completely because it could have been just a blank white piece of cardboard underneath, which would lead us down counterfeiting, fake kind of place, which would be bad. But however, we did have to penalise somebody for a Noble Hierarch problem because they had painted out cards like this, only unfortunately the artist who'd done it had used particularly thick paint for it, and it was really easy to see the Noble Hierarch. I don't remember if we upgraded this one for abusability though, like in the Delver case. I believe we... memory failing. I believe we did not. It was because it was only maybe one or two of the noble hierarchs that could be spotted, and we had to really strain to do it. So it was more of a, this is less than ideal, we'd rather these get replaced, rather than a, we really think you can abuse this and we're going to give you a game loss for it. So yeah, I don't think the question of upgrading ever actually came up from the judge who did the deck check. And this was the same guy who had asked to upgrade the Delver one, so we must have considered it to be less than abusable. Am I too lenient? I don't know. Maybe. Could have been a pattern. I think it was only one or two, so it's fine. What else? Last couple of examples I had. I nearly disqualified a player for this, for Crows and Grip. Crows and Grip is a great card, split second, destroying enchantments, they're fantastic. I nearly disqualified somebody for playing this one in game one. Because it's an obvious sideboard card. Why would you don't have this card main deck, it's in the sideboard. Sadly, it turned out that I had merely misinterpreted the situation, and the reason why the Crows and Grip was in the graveyard at the time was not because it had been drawn and then played, but because it had been milled there by a Sword of Body and Mind, and the opponent had called the judge straight away. So when I came over and I saw it in the grave, I didn't see it in the graveyard, where another judge had found me to say, we're going to do a deck check on this guy to find out whether he really does play the Crows and Grip main deck. He said, no, I don't, it's a sideboard card. I was immediately thinking, if he's drawn it, seen it, knows it's a sideboard card, and has gone and played it anyway, I'm going to be disqualifying this guy for cheating because he's committed an infraction and not told a judge immediately about it in an effort to gain an advantage. But it took quite a long time, especially because the judge who brought the situation to me was not the best English speaker in the first place, to realise that the card had not been played at all. This is why we investigate for cheating. In my investigation, I found out the facts, that it had just been milled there, and so, sure, it's a game loss for failing to de-sideboard, but not going to be a disqualification this time. Kim's mentioned in the chat, haven't I never DQ'd anyone? And yeah, that's true. Maybe I am too lenient. I'm not caught somebody with enough cheating going on for me to disqualify somebody. So there you go. I came very close to it once when I was a level 1 judge. I found what was at the time a cut and dried case of disqualification, but the head judge of that tournament, let's just say he didn't quite know what he was doing, and so he downgraded it to a warning, which was very weird. This was back in the day, it was using sideboard notes, which was totally illegal, and I knew it was illegal, and I would have had a disqualification in my hands if only this wasn't back in the day where I had a less than competent head judge over me. Things are so much better in the judge program these days. What difference a couple of years make. What else have I got? We were asked, does Tormod's Crypt beat Persist? Yes, it does, because if you have a Kitchen Finks and it dies, with Persist on the stack, you can use Tormod's Crypt to remove the Kitchen Finks from the graveyard, and when the Persist trigger goes to resolve, it goes to move the persisting creature from the graveyard back into play, but it can't find it anymore, so it just goes, oh well, I guess you're not there. So yes, Tormod's Crypt beats Persist, which is cool. Then we had a player say, hey, I've got Jin Cataxius in play, and I don't have many cards. Am I allowed to forget to draw the 7 cards so that I don't get decked? No, you can't do this. There was a briefest of brief moments where there might possibly have been a tiny possibility of us accepting this, but that version of the IPG got withdrawn very quickly, and let's just say we don't talk about that anymore. Except we will when the new mistrigger policy does eventually come out. There might be mistrigger changes coming. There really haven't been many yet, if any. So no, you can't choose to not deck yourself. Done. Why did they make that policy? They didn't make that policy. They tried to. They didn't. It didn't happen. I know. I've got an idea in my head of why they were trying something along those lines. The general idea is Players hate pointing out to their opponent, hey, you have to do this thing, this triggered ability. You have to do this thing and it will cause you to win the game. They hate doing that. Look, you win if you do this, and you have to do it. That's what they want to. That's what they want to achieve, I believe. Not the right way of going about it, but never mind. There was one mistrigger change which we had some discussion about, to do with mistriggers going on the bottom of the stack instead of the top. So when we realised that a trigger had been missed, we used to put it on top of the stack, and so that it would be the next thing to resolve. This leads to some slightly awkward situations. So, like, what if there's a creature in play, and I cast Terror targeting it, and then we realise, because of a missed trigger, like that creature shouldn't be there or something like that. Something should have happened. So we put this trigger on, and after resolving this trigger, then the choices made for this spell no longer make any sense, because this trigger's come in and done something at a time that it shouldn't have done. So to try to fix that, we put the trigger on the bottom so that the spell is resolving in very similar circumstances to how it was going to resolve when you cast it. And then we get to the mistrigger and clean up anything afterwards. It makes slightly more sense that way. It does itself lead to problems, because someone brought a cool one to me. It's saying you could miss a Dark Confident trigger and then Lightning Bolt somebody, and then they'd go, hang on, you were supposed to do your Dark Confident thing. And they go, okay, we'll put Dark Confident on the bottom of the stack. And the Lightning Bolt kills them and ends the game before we get to the miss trigger. Of course, the miss trigger from Dark Confident, well, that could have killed you. So, is it ideal either way around? No, because there are cases that make weird things happen. But that's why we have policy documents, to try to make consistent rulings. And sure, weird things will happen sometimes, but that's just the way it is. I have talked for far longer than I thought I was going to. I've just looked down at my recording time and realised I'm over an hour for the first time. So thank you for sticking with me through my stories of GP Madrid. Sorry that I don't have a video of me and Richard Drivers singing Don't Stop Me Now at the top of our lungs in a karaoke bar in Madrid. If you know Andreas Jepsen, talk to him. It's on his iPhone. Yeah, thanks for sticking with me through this stream. It's been good fun. I hope you've enjoyed this insight into what goes on in a GP and the kind of questions you get asked and the kind of direction your head gets pulled in all the time. And yeah, see you next week. Have I told you what I'm doing next week? What am I doing next week? Next week is when I was going to get to the questions that you have been sending me in. I asked before, I set you a piece of homework, which was to take a practice test, either an easy practice test or a hard practice test, or a practice test aimed at your next level. And for any questions that you got wrong, any rules that you didn't understand, tweet the rule number to me at PaulSmithinator, PaulSmithinator, or send them to me by private message on the UK Judge forums if you're on those, or whatever. I just want the rule number because I don't want you to give me the whole question. But tweet me the rule number and I will get through some questions on those. If I have enough to fill out the time, then that's all I'll do. If I don't, then I've got some stuff prepared on attacking and blocking restrictions that'll be up next. So that's my path for the next 1 or 2 weeks. We'll see what happens. If you want something else, send your ideas in. Other than that, thank you again for listening, and see you next week.